Hello, everyone. My name is Alan Dick, and on behalf of my fellow Commerce Next co founders, Scott Silverman and Veronica Sonsev, I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Today is Wednesday, September 9th, 2020, and our topic this week is why customer experience demands optimization at scale. Before we go any further, I'd like to welcome our guest speakers and panelists. First off, Sunil Kaki. He's the EVP of Marketing at OpenFit and Beachbody. John Mandel, the SVP of Membership Marketing, Global E-commerce, Consumer Products and Licensing at Weight Watchers. Sarah Wallace. She's the Research Director and Senior Analyst at Futurum Research. And Michael Scharf, the CEO of Evolv Technologies. I want to thank all of our speakers and to you, our audience, for joining us today. So let's get started. First off, let's take a look at the agenda. We're going to talk about some upcoming events quickly, go over some brief housekeeping notes. Michael is going to take over, give us a little presentation. Sarah follows with a research presentation of her own. By the bottom of the hour, we'll get some audience polling in to get your pulse and your take on things. And then for the remaining half of the webinar, we'll be having a panel discussion and audience Q&A. First off, next week, we have Winning the Holiday Inbox Battle. That's next Wednesday, September 16 at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific. Scott Silverman, one of our co-founders, will be moderating. Scott Clark from Alex and Ani will be there, and Karen D. Clemente from ListTrack will be joining. That's shaping up to be quite a nice little webinar. Hope you can join us for that. We also have our Holiday Summit coming up. This is the Holiday Optimization Summit. Our theme is making the most of the digital first holiday 2020 season. That's going to be Wednesday, October 7th from 1 to 4:30. Registration is now open. You can use that link to go over and get yourself registered for that. That content is definitely looking good. So let's do a little housekeeping notes while we're on it. Don't worry about missing anything. There's a lot of content here, a lot of presentations. We're recording all of it, and we'll make it available by tomorrow. So don't have to break your hand writing everything down. We'll have it recorded for you. And before we go on, let me take a moment to show you where things are on your screen. In the upper right-hand corner is the Q&A functionality. That's where all the questions that you can ask the speakers are. You can do that by using the box at the bottom of the screen. It says, just ask a question. Feel free to use that to ask anything you want. If you see a question in there from someone else and you think it's particularly good, upvote it. That lets us know that that's of importance to more than one person. We'll definitely prioritize those questions. Handouts, both the deck that you are watching here, as well as a white paper from Evolv, are available for download. They're in the handout section on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you're viewing this on the recording, use the document icon at the bottom of the screen to access the handouts. And with that, let's bring on Michael Scharf, the CEO of Evolv, to start us off. Michael, it's all yours.
Thanks, Alan. Hi, I'm thrilled to be here today to share with you some of our observations and experiences. Just a little bit about me and my company. I'm the CEO at Evolv, where we believe that digital experiences are formed from hundreds of design choices and millions of combinations. Serving the experiences that drive growth is like finding the needle in a haystack, and Evolv finds the needle. Digital leaders rely on us to define their digital experience strategy, identify UX improvement ideas, and leverage our proprietary AI technology to confidently achieve their growth goals. I'm going to provide some context to the challenges we see working with leading brands and innovators who are turning to AI to help transform their digital customer experiences. It's safe to say that the digital channels are supposed to be the growth engines for businesses, especially right now. But when we talk to digital leaders, they tell us that the targets are daunting. They're under pressure to deliver huge numbers. They're spending a ton of money on Facebook and Google to drive traffic, but that traffic is just not converting at the rates they expect. And they know the stats, like the one Forrester published, that you can improve conversion rates by up to 400% if you get the customer experience right. So they're relying on their testing teams, their CRO agencies, and their tools vendors, what we like to call the testing industrial complex, to try to solve this conversion problem. But that approach hasn't gotten more customers to hit the buy button. It hasn't made it easier to forecast reliably, and it hasn't changed the equation for the return on ad spend. When you're deep in the world of traditional testing, it's easy to imagine that the customer experience is a choice between A and B. And that means changing a few parameters to end up with testing to validate if website A or website B is better. Except that what customers are actually seeing isn't just a few parameters that change between A or B. It's a nearly limitless variation in millions of different possible experiences that you might choose. In addition to that, the environment is constantly changing. When building digital experiences, you have a complex set of choices to make to convert your visitors. Those choices can include visual design considerations, site navigation, page prioritization, copywriting, search functionality, and everything else that goes into the look, feel, and functionality of your experience. To make matters worse, the ideal experience changes over time. Your competitors launch introductory offers, your products change, seasons change, or maybe you get hit with a global pandemic, and all of a sudden your site that was popular with millennials and Gen Xers needs to appeal to baby boomers or other new audiences. Meanwhile, typical website conversion rates hover around 3%, while Amazon is closer to 13% and 74% for Prime members. There's a lot of room for improvement. A/B testing as a major underpinning of experimentation has been around for a long time, since 1753 in fact. Today it is used by many companies, including Google, Facebook, and Amazon, to transform experiences in the hopes to help make money tied to those strategies. There are 3 stages, and each of these relies very heavily on people. 1, decision-making, which is increasingly based on data. 2, innovation, presuming that you can run impactful experience that drive results. And 3, experimentation as a risk management methodology. The challenges with this model is that data collection is costly, you're limited in how many experiments you can run, and the time spent experimenting means you have less time to exploit the value of the winning experiences. In other words, gains from testing take way too long to deliver. Our message to digital leaders is that the testing industrial complex has failed you. You can keep feeding that beast, but you know what Einstein said, doing the same thing over and over again but expecting different results leads to. The digital experience has nearly limitless variations. To find the one that gets your customer to hit the buy button, you're looking for a needle in a haystack, while more like a needle in a Raiders of the Lost Ark grade set of haystacks, since every audience is different and every day is different. This is why so many companies are looking to AI and its ability to tackle the challenges on a much bigger scale. Now I want to talk about 4 observations based on the current environment and some trends. Let's start with COVID-19, which has had a profound impact on most companies. We have not finished seeing its full impact, which includes nearly wiping out entire business models and forcing others to adapt. The customer experience has been reshaped in so many ways. We continue to see new buying experiences from delivery and curbside pickup to significant impacts on supply chain as demand for items such as disinfectants continue to cripple delivery and many other impacts. Even companies with a strong online presence have had to adapt to a whole new category of customers now wanting to use their services. Ensuring a positive experience in the face of so many new users with different levels of technology savviness is truly daunting. The increasing complexity of the user journey and the speed at which it is happening is really putting a toll on companies as they try to adapt. We've seen 3 types of responses to these challenges emerge. 1, early movers. Times like these open the doors for companies who see the opportunity and shift their strategies to increase their pace of innovation. Companies like Verizon, Best Buy, and Instacart are just a few. We'll dig a little deeper into Best Buy's recent success shortly. Number 2, cautiously optimistic companies. The second category includes companies that had plans for digital innovation, but decided to temporarily slow down their efforts or even to halt them for a period of time. We are now seeing many of these companies accepting the new reality and once again stepping up their plans, and in many ways some of them are even going faster than their initial plans in the hopes of trying to gain a competitive advantage. And then finally, laggards. These companies continue to delay their plans for digital innovation. We've seen many companies dealing with an increase in business, think grocery stores. They are prioritizing supply chain issues over other innovations, which may seem like a good idea in the moment, but the challenges are that these companies will quickly find themselves at a serious competitive disadvantage compared to the companies that are innovating broadly in the first 2 categories. This leads me to my 3rd observation. which is all companies need to prioritize digital transformation now. We know most companies have long-term plans, and many of these plans get delayed in the normal course of business. As seen with the laggards, though, the risk of falling helplessly behind is very real and should not be ignored. Short-term gains and successes cannot keep you from seeing how profoundly business models have been changed, and many of these changes are here to stay. In many ways, there is a new bar set, and companies unable to transform will likely find it hard to succeed and stay relevant. This is a clear case for why AI should be a major building block to help companies remain competitive and continue to optimize their customer experiences in the face of rapidly evolving dynamics. Let's look at a quick case study. Best Buy just came off its biggest quarterly increase in online sales ever. Their success is directly attributable to more people converting from browsing to buying. They reacted quickly to support curbside pickup and enhanced delivery options, and this set them up nicely when they decided to reopen their stores. In fact, they beat Wall Street expectations for same-store sales, which grew at 5.8% last quarter. Best Buy showed tremendous leadership in working within the new reality and their understanding that these trends are here to stay even after COVID disappears. It really comes down to a couple of major success factors. Their ability to make changes to their website and their mobile app almost overnight. This is a result of major investments over the years in agile platforms. And they also have the ability to experiment and try different ideas all the time. And secondly, long-term investments in customer centricity and operations. They're able to make changes based on their customer needs in real time, and they have connected every aspect of the customer experience through fulfillment. And because of COVID, they're working to identify how to use their stores and their teams differently, and even turning about a quarter of their stores into distribution hubs that can handle higher volumes of online orders. All in all, Best Buy is already prepared for the holidays, and in a way that should put other retailers on notice that they need to adapt or face unheard of competitive pressures. So in closing, I just want to bring these observations into focus and challenge all of you to think about the upcoming holiday season and how prepared you are. There's no doubt that a new baseline has been set, and we know customers are unforgiving for those unable to meet their expectations. Companies who are still figuring out how to deliver a new digital experience a few months ago will no longer get a pass, especially if their competitors have figured this out. As we've seen with Best Buy, success is based on a customer-centric approach, which means having ways to optimize the customer experience and continuing to adapt to changing situations. This means companies also need to rethink their traditional model of stopping innovation heading into the holidays. This approach is deeply tied to the history of experimentation and an old perspective based on how long it takes to implement such capabilities and their disruption to other systems. That thinking is simply flawed and stuck in the past. There are new AI-based solutions which can be quickly and easily implemented that can deliver an immediate impact on your business, as well as continue to point the way to maximize results even for this holiday season. Thanks for your time today, and I look forward to your questions during the Q&A session. Back to you, Alan.
Thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate that. Michael will be joining us again at the bottom of the hour when we bring on our full panel. Don't forget, you can ask Michael or any of the panelists questions you want by using the Q&A field at the right of your screen. Now I'm going to have us be joined by Sarah Wallace. She's the Research Director and Senior Analyst at Futurum Research. She's going to be sharing her thoughts from some findings from a 2020 Digital Transformation Index. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Alan, for having me here today. So hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Wallace. I'm a Research Director for Future Research, and today I'm going to talk about our Digital Transformation Index. And Michael has already talked a lot about digital transformation today, and I'm going to present some research that we've done that'll tie in with the conversation. So first to note, our Digital Transformation Index, we surveyed respondents in areas like banking, financial services, consumer products, retail, energy/utilities, healthcare, pharmacy, media and technology, industrial manufacturing, public sector, and real estate. And we had about 1,000 respondents from North America and Europe. And just to note, we have very selective filters. So when we're trying to find people to interview, we want to make sure that we have decision makers. So we want those that are involved with purchasing decisions, company strategy. So we ask C-level executives, VPs, directors, managers, those involved with operations, etc. So in terms of adapting to technology, we asked respondents how they felt about technology disruption. So an example would be something like 5G, where bandwidth and capacity will be increased exponentially. And company IT will have to adapt accordingly. And of course, obviously, as we've already been discussing today, external factors such as the global pandemic, where everyday tasks that have had to be quickly ramped up and be made virtual. And as you can see here, nearly half of the respondents perceive technology disruption as an opportunity. And while the next most popular answer is, we will adapt to it eventually, and we always do. And note that this question was asked pre-pandemic. And note, as we know, as of March, the attitude of eventually was no longer a choice. And I will be posting some post-COVID sentiment as well later on in my presentation. In terms of who's actively leading digital transformation, the majority of respondents answered senior executive team or C-suite or department heads like VPs. So this is interesting, as over the years in studying digital transformation, what's noted is that what's really important for the execution of digital transformation is making sure that stakeholders across all departments are on board and in agreement with one another. So this means not just the CTO, but the CMO, the VP of marketing, heads of customer care, those in charge of online digital touchpoints as well. So that leads to the next question. Are there particular personas in your organization that are holding your digital transformation back? And note, this question was posed as sort of a check all that apply. And the majority of respondents checked both no one, we're all committed to making this work, while the second most popular was the CEO, the board of directors, followed by the C-suite. And so what we have here right in a row are two extremes. Either respondents feel that everyone is on board, or we have finger pointing to the executives. And what this indicates to me is that there's a disconnect, and that perhaps no one really is sure or able to pinpoint what exactly is hindering their digital transformation. And this means companies really need to take tasks like testing, for example, seriously to try and pinpoint problem areas in operations and customer care. So as opposed to the last slide, the perception of what seems to be really helping digital transformation really seems to be those who are, let's say, more in the trenches. So support from managers, fellow employees, and also here technology partners. So this means that stakeholders need to be engaged with those across the organization that are helping to enhance customer digital touchpoints. So when asked, what's the biggest obstacle driving your digital transformation? The number one answer is simply budget. And this is the conundrum that most IT departments face today. They're asked to be agile and support innovative products and solutions, but at the same time, they face budget constraints. And that's why any new solution that they do have the budget for must not only give them some return on their investment, but now they have to give them mega value. So it must give them value in terms of capability and efficiency. In terms of how respondents' companies are handling digital transformation, You'll see here about 40% report that there is a special digital transformation team in place, and 31% have digital transformation milestones and objectives. And then 20%, IT has embedded resources in every department to facilitate digital transformation and initiatives. So this shows that companies across all verticals are taking steps to make sure digital transformation is part of the company culture. In terms of C-level executives, in terms of who the perception of what leadership is competent in terms of digital literacy, it seems that C-level executives seem to be competent in terms of the digital literacy, and respondents view the CTO to be extremely competent, followed by the CMO, the COO, and the Chief Customer Care Officer, all being comfortably knowledgeable. So this shows that the customer-facing side of the company, so in tying in today's conversation, so that means e-commerce, online customer care touchpoints, they need to be just as digitally savvy as a CTO. And as an analyst, I've been an analyst for about 2 decades now, and I've seen the trend. Vendors used to start out presenting and catering to the CTO, but now they're catering solutions and presentations to the CTO, the CMO, and the heads of customer care as well. In terms of what core digital transformation technologies respondents say their companies are focusing on in the next 12 months, cloud-based solutions, big data, AI are the biggest main focuses. And this indicates that companies, they want agile solutions that are going to be able to make sense of all their customer data while having an algorithm engine that will be able to predict customer needs. And as we most recently asked this question again, having to correspond with the global events being the pandemic, cloud-based solutions and AI are even stronger priorities today. So overall, companies across all industry verticals are looking for agile solutions that have an AI engine and are able to help them with digital transformation, especially now as online interactions are becoming a good crucial part of the digital touch point for customers. And internally, companies are looking not only to the CTO and operations, but the CMO and customer care to help lead in digital transformation, while managers, fellow employees, and even partners seem to be the key players in accelerating digital transformation. And to continue to help companies through all the verticals through this pandemic and the future and beyond, it will be the solution providers who offer mega value and efficiency that will lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And now we're going to turn to you, the audience. We want to set the stage for the panelists by asking you several experience optimization questions. But before we do that, I want to run over some things here for those of you that joined us late. If you're going to be answering the polls, just click on the polls icon at the top of the screen on your top right. Once the polls are over, you can find out all the answers that your fellow attendees have included in for their polling questions. If you're watching this on the replay, you can use the document icon located at the bottom of the screen to reference all of the poll results as well as all of our handouts. And again, if you joined us late, don't forget that you can use the Q&A field at any time to ask our speakers questions. I see a couple have come in, so we're on our way there. All right, now it's poll time. Question number 1, and everyone can answer this. Answer once on this. How many e-commerce site experiments, A/B testing, do you run per month? Is it none, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, or more than 20? definitely the range is between 1 and 10. I'm going to close that poll, and we're going to move on to the next one. Question 2, this is a really complicated one. Are you satisfied with your current level of testing? That's the question. Are you satisfied? Yes or no? And I'm going to close that poll. Next up, what, if anything, is preventing you from testing more often? You can choose all that applies. I'm going to give this a little extra time because this is a question I really like the panelists to kind of have in the back of their mind. What, if anything, is preventing you from testing more often? Is it budget constraints, time constraints, technology, lack of support from senior management, lack of quality data? Maybe you are satisfied with the current level of testing. Or if there's something else we missed in there, you can just type that in the Q&A field. So it looks like it's time and technology are the two things that are constraining you. Thank you so much for that. And finally, for next week's webinar, we're going to ask this question: how confident are you that your CRM strategy will be successful during the upcoming holiday season? Are you very confident, somewhat confident, neutral on this, somewhat worried, or very worried? So far, looks like somewhat confident. 41%, somewhat confident. 18% are very confident. 18% are neutral. And surprisingly, somewhat worried and very worried combined are only 24%. So yeah, 3/4 of you are definitely in the neutral to somewhat to very confident. Very interesting. I'm going to close that one. All right. Very good. Well, thank you so much, audience. We really appreciate you taking the time to answer those questions. That helps frame our discussion. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask all of the panelists to turn on their cameras. Hey, John, don't forget to turn on your microphones.
How you doing?
Good. Sunil, are you, sir? Don't forget to turn on your microphone. We are waiting for Sarah and Michael to turn on their cameras. All right. And while we wait for Michael to join us, John, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience? And then Sunil, I'll have you introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks, Alan. So my name is John Mandel. I lead member marketing as well as consumer products and e-commerce for WW, formerly Weight Watchers. So responsible for retention of all of our 5 million members across the globe, as well as the creation, curation, and licensing of the products that we make for folks.
Very good. Sunil.
Hey guys, this is Sunil. I head up all consumer marketing for Beachbody and OpenFit. For those that don't know, we have a digital fitness platform. We have a little over 3 million active paying members on the platform. And I head up all of the consumer marketing, everything from customer acquisition to A/B testing, to CRM and content and blog and all those things. And it's good to be here.
All right. Thanks for joining us, guys. And John, by the way, I love your backdrop. It is so branded and so on target. It's so much better than the clutter that is is my office backdrop.
It's hiding a big mess, but it works.
Yes, we've all adapted to this new reality. All right. So let's jump right in. Sunil, I'm going to start with you. Where should retailers begin their efforts to improve their customer experience? Should they focus only on the customer sales journey, or should they be diverting resources to optimize the entire journey, like retention, customer service, return logistics? Sunil, I'm going to start with you, then John, I'm going to come over to you for that one.
Yeah, no, I think all of it is absolutely relevant and important, but when reality sort of hits around resource constraints, it's really about prioritization. And that's where, for me at least, I focus on where we can have the biggest impact. And that's usually starting from the front of the funnel all the way through all the way through and then reactivating, canceling customers. But really, you can have a huge impact on the front of the funnel and the sales funnel, because every basis point improvement there has a massive impact to the file size and the base.
Okay, good point. John?
Yeah, so certainly agree with that. But I think the one thing that I would add is also just look where you're the weakest, because the entire experience really matters. And oftentimes we focus too much on the KPIs that are around conversion. But if your experience isn't good enough at getting people there, if your experience at the end isn't good enough to retain them, some of those other KPIs are going to be equally as important. So while you definitely want to focus on the top of the funnel, I think it's really important to just be aware of where you're the weakest and really put some energy in there.
Mm-hmm. Sarah?
I actually totally,
go ahead.
Sorry, I totally agree with you. And I think the other thing that's important is really where the customers have a high intent to engage. Really, if you look at sort of the post metrics of engagement, that could be a self-fulfilling thing. To your point, John, if you're terrible at it, they're not engaging with it, but doesn't mean that's where they're trying to engage and it's just failing. So really high intent of engagement is really important as well, in addition to where you're failing. So I totally agree.
Excellent. Sarah, Michael, any additional thoughts on that one?
Yeah, well, I agree obviously with both Sunil and John. When we start an engagement with a client, we always try to find the area with the biggest near-term opportunity for KPI improvement, whether that's transactions or signing up for credit cards or signing up for emails. And we do that, one, to help drive results, but also to build confidence and education about the platform and how the tools work. So then you can get more creative and start to expand how you look for optimizations across the entire customer journey, which is critical, because you do have to not only focus on the areas you want to drive, but also look for areas of opportunity that you don't perform well.
Sarah, any thoughts on that, or do we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole customer journey is always important. So you can sell someone a smartphone, but if they have poor support or they're having quality of service issues and they've been calling in, you got to be keeping track of that, or else you're going to have a customer that's going to churn. So,
yeah. Mike, you mentioned KPIs in your last answer, and that kind of dovetails into where I want to move next. What KPIs should we be watching to improve the overall customer experience? What are your clients typically? You've got that 30,000 foot view. What are your clients looking at?
Yeah, so I've been in e-commerce now for 20 years or so, and ironically, the problems that we're facing now are the same ones we were facing in 1999. The biggest one, continues to be, and I mentioned this in my presentation, is conversion. Getting customers to take the action that you're trying to inspire them to take. So for most brands, that's a retail transaction, but any customer-facing B2C business on the web has some action they want customers to engage with. Netflix wants people to click and watch a show. Credit card companies want applications. And retailers want purchases. So, that's the easiest and the simple one, but it's not a single fix to solve it. There are hundreds or thousands of things that drive conversion rates, which is, the area you have to really untangle and look for all of the elements of the experience that drive to the ultimate objective that you want to achieve. And that's, more frequent purchases over time for more money.
Yep. John, you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so obviously I agree with that, but I think the one thing that we've learned, and I've seen this prior to being at WW as well, is when everyone's focused on cart abandonment, they're really looking at speed. How fast can we get someone through checkout? And I think oftentimes speed gets confused with ease. It should really be how easy is it to get someone through checkout. Don't ask questions when you know the answers. If I tell you my credit card starts with a 4, don't ask me if it's a Visa when you know that. If I type in my zip code, don't then ask me to type in my city. These little things like that, that helps just make it easier. One of the things we do at WW is we offer members an assessment to help them choose the right plan. They don't mind taking it because they find value and that they're willing to spend time to have a positive experience. What people don't want to do is feel like they're wasting their time. So as long as you're providing value, then I think you're going to have a good checkout experience. If you are just creating a mess, but just because you streamline it on the one page and it seems fast, I think we're still missing the point a little bit.
Yeah, I agree completely. Some of our most successful experiments have been around simplifying customer experiences and taking extraneous elements out of the way and making the overall experience more intuitive so customers can really get to what they're trying to get to. And that's complicated when you're in an environment where you have a lot of business owners trying to get lots of different things accomplished, especially in a checkout cart. So, simplification is definitely key.
I know you've got some thoughts on that. No, go ahead.
It's the expectation as well, right? Because regardless of who's in your competitive set, we've all used a website or an app or anything where you start typing in the first 3 letters of your address and the rest auto-populates. And then anytime you go anywhere that doesn't have it, you're scratching your head. It's like, well, why can't everyone do that? That seems really easy.
Yeah, the customer experience expectations are not set by your competitors, but by the best on the internet, regardless of what they are, whether it's Google or Amazon or Facebook or Netflix. It doesn't really matter if it's a competitor.
No.
Well, Sunil, I know you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think cart abandonment, I think, is sort of the symptom and usually not necessarily the entire problem or the disease, right? So really, like for us, the way that we structure our KPIs are kind of in 3 buckets, really around creating momentum for the user. And that's either through like a quiz or making product discovery easier, and really thinking about what the KPIs are that align to creating momentum for the user to kind of get on their journey. The second one is really reducing anxiety. So especially if you're a new brand or a brand that the user hasn't really heard of you, there's a lot of anxiety if you're legit or not, if this is valid, is the product claims legitimate or not. There's a lot of work that could be done on really reducing anxiety and getting people to go forward. And the third piece that's really important is building trust, which is related, but has a huge impact even in the checkout process. So Michael, to your point, like streamlining is great, and but adding sort of those right elements or right steps to really build the trust actually improves conversion rate. And it's not always about reducing the number of steps, but really being intentional about what each step really is trying to go do. And a great example is actually Netflix, which I started noticing a lot more recently. Everybody knows about Netflix. They have a 3-step checkout process, but it's actually 6 pages. They have a preamble to every step, which explains why they're asking for a password, why they're asking for a credit card, why they're asking for the next thing. So it's really 6 things that people go through, but it's only really 3 steps. But I just think it does such a good job of reducing the anxiety of, if it's a free trial, why do I need to put in a credit card? Like, that's a very good sort of question that people ask and people abandon when they see the credit card for a free trial. But I think it's really being intentional about each step rather than just reducing the number of steps, really focusing on like, what are you trying to solve for? I think has been really, really powerful for us.
Yeah, that's interesting. We have a question from the audience, and I'll just remind everyone, please ask your questions. We'll get to as many of them as we can. Please forgive me if I don't pronounce the name correctly. Viswanath has asked, creation of the account is the second highest reason for shopping cart abandonment. Do you agree with that statement? And if you do, how would we resolve it? Any additional thoughts on that? I want to just, while we're talking about cart abandonment, I just wanted to hit that question. It's about the account creation. I know, Sunil, you were talking about like asking for a credit card on a free trial.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, Sarah, John? I want to make sure we get a chance to answer that.
I know people, this comes up a lot. It certainly did in my prior role. I used to work at 1-800-Flowers, but most places I shop at now online, I have an account, and it's not even a choice. You cannot shop as a guest on Amazon. So I know that some people are put off by it, and there's certainly strong data that supports it, but I don't personally know anyone or haven't seen a ton of data that supports that just because you ask someone for a password, that they're no longer going to buy the thing that they were going to buy after they've spent X amount of time doing it. We've all got our handful of 5 passwords and 8 different combinations that we use for everything. And I think people are just used to having them at this point. And especially if you're doing something in mobile, because the phones make it so easy to populate the password and store it for you and things like that. So I don't think it's as big of an issue as it used to be. But certainly, every brand needs to look at that differently.
Cool. Any additional thoughts?
Yeah, the social sign-in has been helpful for us. So Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, like now all of these guys have sort of their social sign-in. So that's helped, but you can't inundate a page with 5 or 6 different options. So you really have to figure out what you want to prioritize, how you want to visually show it. Otherwise, it gets a little bit a cognitive overload around what do I use. But that's actually definitely helped the account creation step.
Okay. Sarah, I want to give you a question. Given the times that we're in, you just have to ask the question, how have you seen consumer behavior in the time of COVID change optimization priorities or methodologies? What are you seeing from your 30,000-foot view?
Yeah, so, from a vendor perspective, obviously, all the tech vendors have really come to market with these solutions pretty much within, overnight, trying to help various enterprises, right, in different verticals. But on the flip side, we see the consumers adapting as well, right? So we see baby boomers who maybe had never used Instacart now using Instacart. And, as we had talked earlier in the week, I myself, speaking of Best Buy, went onto their site and ordered a fan that was delivered to my house within an hour. And that has converted me. I'm hoping that Best Buy continues that service because as a consumer, it's great. And so, we've seen the congruent conversion of both the vendor side, the enterprises, and the consumers really changing their behavior. So, if there's any upside to the pandemic, it's really made everyone accelerate their digital transformation and also see that it's all possible. Right? So.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts from our panel there? Okay, because I know it all kind of blends in. How people react or how you guys are going to be talking about it. I do want to ask, I want to get another audience question in here. Shannon Catapan has asked, how would you measure, quote, high intent to engage? What would you look at pre or post that engagement action? How would you measure high intent to engage? And what would you look at pre or post that engagement action? Sunil, I see you nodding your head. I think I'll give that one to you to start with.
Yeah, it's really about the early indicators, right? Like, let's say if you sent an email, if the email has a high open rate, for example, and a high click rate, but they're just not converting for whatever action you're trying to drive. The high open rate shows high intent, and then you're failing the user somewhere down the line on the site or on the page that they landed or something. But really not just looking at just end conversion rates, looking at the entire funnel all the way through, all the way from an open rate, or if there is a social post, organic post, high engagement rate for the post, but then they click through and then they never convert. But really saying like people are definitely raising their hand and looking for those early metrics to gauge like how they're raising their hand. And then you might be failing them as a business once they do raise their hand and click through. And those are great sort of finds or insights to go fix because people are interested.
Okay. John, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's when you start seeing people not completing or not going as far as not necessarily you would like, but if you were to take an average and you start to see where people are dropping off, right? Whether it's on the initial traffic coming to the site, if they're already part of your experience, could be on their attention site, there was a repeat visit. For us as a membership business, it's how often are you engaging or not engaging, or which pieces of our offering are you engaging with, and then which ones aren't you, right? So you can help fill that out and make sure they're getting the most out of whatever it is that you're the product or service.
Okay. Excellent. So we've been talking a lot about the specific areas where retailers can improve their customer experience, but I'm kind of wondering if retailers are identifying those best areas in the first place. And Mike, I'm going to kick this to you. I mean, obviously you're a proponent of AI-based optimization. That's your bag. But based on your experiences, how is AI-led optimization done at identifying new or unexpected problem areas? Like have you been finding, for instance, that a couple of small problems, they're kind of nothing there to, on their own, but together, now we have an issue we need to look at, or conversely, you've got two or three good things and all together they really work.
That's a great Yeah, it's a great question, Alan. And every client is different, and what moves the needle for each client is constantly changing based on changes in the marketplace and changes in their business. We actually just finished running a series of experiments with one of the largest drugstores in the world. And they had a pretty significant testing and experimentation program, but they weren't getting the kind of results they were looking for. And once we implemented our AI platform, they started exploring and testing combinations of ideas. And we pretty quickly found a significant set of winners that drove a 12% increase in conversion. And one of the things they said to us is that our platform found a combination, that needle in the haystack, proverbially speaking, that they would have never thought to test. And the benefit of using AI at scale is you can actually put hundreds, thousands, potentially millions of combinations out into the platform to let it start to identify combinations that drive performance that may not be intuitive to the experimentation lead. And the system will find those and surface those and give you the results to identify new things you may want to consider trying or expanding on your platform. So yeah, there's no way to do that with a traditional A/B testing tool. You just can't test the number of combinations that you can with an AI-based platform.
Sunil or John, any times or instances where you've seen some just odd combinations work one way or the other? Sunil, I'll start with you.
Yeah. Just recently we've been testing sort of trial duration and pricing combinations. So historically, we sort of were testing different pricing levels. This is for a new product that we're about to launch. And just the combination of trial duration, because we're in this fitness space, longer the trial isn't always better for engagement. As you can imagine, nobody really wants to work out. It's not like Netflix, where you can give a 90-day free trial and people will still convert, and the high likelihood that they'll actually convert more is better because they just have 90 days to get hooked on Netflix. For fitness, it's actually not the case, and I'm sure at WW it's probably similar. You do want to create the sense of urgency and an incentive early on. So really, shorter duration of trial is not only good for our business, but it's also actually good for the customer, so that it gives them an incentive to either try the product and get started. So really a unique combination of higher price and shorter trial yielded sort of counterintuitive results for driving early engagement, and at least in our category. It's not always true, but at least in our category, it was sort of a counterintuitive thing, that higher price and shorter trial duration actually drives early engagement at a higher rate.
Excellent.
John, I was going to say, on a related topic, there were two questions here, kind of touched on this from Bradley and Janet about, brand guidelines and how do you make sure you don't do something that's off brand. And I just want to say, within our tool, the system doesn't actually generate the ideas. It generates changes based on the ideas that the users put in, and those are based on our optimization experts working in partnership with the partners at the retail brands. So you set up a series of changes, and then the system will explore those changes to see which ones work best. So you can certainly put in your brand guidelines, your color guidelines, font sizes, shapes, things like that, as well as set the system to make sure you don't put white text over white backgrounds or things like that. So that's one element of it that ensures that you don't do things that you really shouldn't do. Hand it back over to you.
Yeah, no worries. John, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Sunil said, we're in very similar categories when it comes to that. I think the only little nuance I think between where we're different is shorter is better than longer, but not too short, because our members are looking to see results. And I think that after a few weeks on a weight management and wellness platform, I think you're looking to see a little bit more results than fitness. And so we spend quite a bit of time finding the right nuance into how much do you front load an experience, and get people used to doing the program. And then for us, we have very just different experiences by people that we've tested our way into. But as a company that's been around for 57 years, and I'm sure that every single person listening to this knows someone who's been on WW. So there's this balance between people who know the program and the people who are finding out about it for the first time versus the ones who have been on it before our digital transformation. It's just so profoundly different. So we really need to find out what level of awareness people have for our offering once they get there, and then start treating them differently. If you know everything about it, you get very turned off by someone walking you through something step by step. But treating everyone like they know it when they don't is a good way to turn people off as well. So there's a lot of little nuances in there in getting people engaged the right way.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Sarah, when we did the poll, we asked folks, what, if anything, is preventing you from testing more often? And the number one response was time constraints, followed by technology constraints, then budget constraints. You've seen the research over time. I'm certain you've got some thoughts on that. I'll let you make some commentary on that. What are your thinking on those results?
Yeah, so the technology and budget constraints don't surprise me at all. The time constraint is an interesting answer, but it's definitely something to, I think, do a deeper dive into in terms of time constraints. Is it, to what level is that? Is it because of the way a department runs? Is it in terms of their decision making and how long it takes internally to actually, get some of these programs going? But I found that very intriguing. That was one of the top answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How are you guys feeling, John and Sunil? Do you feel the time constraints now? Has the time scale just been crunched tremendously because of COVID? I mean, that becomes now the limiting agent, or there are other factors that you guys have to consider. John, I'll start with you.
I don't know that time is any more of a factor now than it was before. There's a million things to do and so many hours in the day or resources available. So for me, COVID hasn't made a big impact on our time constraints, but it certainly has changed where we shifted some of our resources and the areas that we're going to test and what we wouldn't test. I think there are some things that pre-COVID we would have tested and probably had a more drawn out experience, and now we're like, well, it's just the right thing to do, and if nothing else, let's just err on the side of doing the right thing. So whether that was in messaging or any other sort of communications or the way we nuance things, we probably just didn't test that because it just had to be done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sunil?
Yeah, in some ways it's we just have a lot more traffic and engagement across the board. So we actually have more opportunity to go test. So we can run multiple cells at once and read stat sig or statistical significance at much faster rates. So in some ways, we're sort of been taking advantage of the higher response rate that we're seeing across the board to test a lot more. So it's about sort of shifting priority to testing, because again, we're not going to be, thankfully, we're not going to be in this pandemic forever, and really making sure that we're learning as much as possible during this time so that when we come out of it, that we're a step function better across the board. That's sort of been the mindset for us, and really focusing on testing across the board because we just have more traffic and more engagement from our users to go test with.
Great. Well, we're getting close to the end of the webinar. There's a couple of other questions I want to get to. Bradley, I'm definitely going to get to your question about the code freeze mindset, but I definitely want to talk briefly about like the skill sets or traits of the people you want working on your optimization efforts. We've talked technology, we've talked about strategy, we've talked about tactics. It takes the people to implement them. And I thought we had some good discussion around that on our prep call, and I wanted the audience to hear some of that. So let's start with Michael. Why don't we get your initial thoughts on this, and then I'll hit John and Sunil and Sarah.
Yeah, so my first thought is that culture is significantly more important than skill set. You can find and hire people with the right skill sets, but a culture of risk-taking and the understanding that the world we live in is super dynamic, and you need to constantly be innovating, experimenting, and taking risks to figure out what's going to work is really critical. And there are obviously a lot of skills around optimization, like coding skill sets, analyzing, analytical skill sets that are important. But if it doesn't start with the culture, and this goes back to the poll earlier, who's driving the change and then who's actually inhibiting the change. And it was interesting to see that it's usually the same two groups that are driving change and inhibiting change at the leadership level. And having a culture from the top down that really encourages and rewards experimentation is the only way to succeed if you want to be nimble and innovative.
Cool. We're going to do this as a speed round. John, any other comments on that?
No, I mean, our CEO, Mindy Grossman, says all the time that culture trumps strategy. And I agree here as well. It's that culture. It's finding the people who are natural problem solvers that can really help, and they can be taught or surrounded by people that need to get in the weeds analytically. But that leadership needs to come with people who are just really in tune with wanting to and being good at thinking outside the box and finding problems, because that's how you're going to get some of your best testing accomplished.
Sunil, I know you had a quick thought on that about the degree of ownership.
Yeah, exactly. There's main sort of three things that I look for when I'm sort of building a company or building a team within the company. It's really a high level of empathy for the customer. Amazon calls it customer obsession, but I think that extends beyond just the customer. It's really empathy for fellow employees and the community that you're serving and be part of. The second one is really a high degree of ownership of the outcome. That means like you're not just doing your list of 10 things and moving on, but you're actually sticking around to make sure the outcome actually is as good as it can be, regardless of what your ownership was. And then really the third thing is willingness and ability to take calculated big swings. So those two are really important, willingness and ability. Some people are really want to do big things, but they're not able to sort of take those calculated big swings. It's not just for the sake of big swings, but really taking those calculated big swings. Those are the things I think like those three areas are really important when I'm either hiring or building teams and kind of creating a culture.
Okay, great. I'm going to hit a couple more questions here from the audience. Bradley Carmichael asks, and this is from Michael. Michael mentioned moving away from a code freeze mindset. Can he share a bit more about how to do this and avoid risks? And does he see some areas as third rails that should never be touched during the holiday?
Yeah, so, the idea of code freeze, is certainly an important one because you don't want your systems to be at risk during your peak season, your technical code, and freezing your experimentation and optimization. So the key is, our platform allows for really simple integration using an API-first framework that once you've implemented, you can continue to optimize and run experiments, whenever you want, as complicated as you want. And in order to minimize risk, you can also segment traffic to avoid conflicting with other programs or other testing platforms that you might have running at the same time. So we certainly, look at that. And then in terms of avoiding those third rails during the holiday, again, that comes back to the guidelines that you set up for your platform for testing or optimization, working with your UX teams to define which things can't be touched. So, most brands feel pretty strongly about their logos, their colors, their font sizes, things like that. But I think, the more we experiment with clients, the more they realize there are things that have traditionally been kind of within the bounds of, or outside the bounds of testing, that if you start opening up and testing more, you can actually drive improved results, and then you can have some interesting discussions around how do you use that data to affect how you set your brand guidelines and which things really matter to the brand and to the customer experience at the end of the day.
Yep. And the final question, just so we get to it, from Adam Bronwell. For us, the time-constrained problem is that A/B tests take a while to collect enough data for us to be confident in the conclusion. Is there any way to speed this up? I'll open that as a toss-up question. John, do you want to maybe take a stab at that? Or Mike, you seem to be itching to hit that one.
Yeah, I'll let Mike take that one.
Yeah, well, I'll say, traditional A/B testing is slow, and that is why we developed Evolv. It uses really advanced machine learning methodologies and a whole host of technologies to dramatically accelerate the ability to test and optimize experiences. So you're right, A/B testing requires a lot of traffic. It requires a really relatively simple set of things that you're testing against each other to reach statistical significance with that format. So we believe, technology is the way to solve that problem for scale and speed.
All right. And with that, we are going to wrap this up. I want to thank all of our speakers, Sunil, John, Sarah, Michael. Thank you guys so much for joining us and chatting with us today. I also want to thank Evolv for sponsoring today's webinar. Don't forget, you can download the slides and the Evolv white paper by clicking on the handouts section on the right of your screen. And finally, Thanks to you, our audience, for taking the time to join us today. We appreciate your continued interest and support. By way of reminder, next week we have Winning the Holiday Inbox Battle with Scott Silverman, Scott Clark, and Karen D. Clemente. Our holiday summit's coming up on October 7th, and you can register for that. And as always, we do have our digital resource center with all of our research and blog posts and webinars. They're all there for you to look at. And with that, I just want to say thank you. This has been Alan Dick, and on behalf of my fellow co-founders, Scott Silverman and Veronica Sonsef, we all wish that you stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.